Vamos a esperar que llegue.
We're going to wait until the Chief of Mission arrives before starting.
El jefe de la misión de observación electoral.
Of the Electoral Observation Mission.
Buenos días, vamos a esperar un minuto más para
We're just going to wait a few more moments until the chief of the EOM arrives so we can get started.
Bueno, muy
Good morning, everyone, all the authorities in attendance. The Secretariat staff, ambassadors, delegates, ladies and gentlemen, and the general audience. The Secretary tells us that we do have a quorum, so we call to session this special session of the Permanent Council that has been convened pursuant to Article 37B of the Rules of Procedure of this Council at the behest of the permanent missions of Antigua and Barbuda, Argentina, Belize, Bolivia, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Ecuador, Guatemala, Guyana, Honduras, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Dominican Republic, Uruguay. By way of document CP INF 10786/25 and addendum, with the purpose, and I quote, of receiving information about the general elections held in Honduras on November 30th of 2025 by the chief of the Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS. Pursuant to Article 43 of the Rules of Procedure, I put to the consideration of the Permanent Council the draft order of business in document CPOD 257425. If there aren't any observations, approved. Before moving on, in consideration of the presentation to be made by the chief of the Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS in Honduras, I would ask for the leave of the delegations to apply a special dispensation of the 15 minutes for interventions called for by Article 46 of the Rules of Procedure at the behest of the delegations of the Dominican Republic, Honduras. I would ask if the Permanent Council would offer that a similar dispensation for those interventions made by the Foreign Minister of the Dominican Republic, Ambassador Gerardo Torres, Subsecretary of State from the Office of Foreign Relations and International Cooperation of Honduras as well, also in attendance, allowing them 10 minutes each. 7 minutes actually for the representative of Argentina. No objections, it's so agreed. Item 2. For the consideration of the next item on today's order of business, I'm pleased to give a warm welcome to Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, Chief of the Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS in Honduras. Ambassador Loizaga, welcome to the Permanent Council of the OAS. Once again, you have the floor. Thank you very much. I would like to start by saying that it's a pleasure, a great pleasure for me to be here, Chairman, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, ambassadors and permanent representatives at this headquarters, though yes, where I in '74 started my diplomatic work as an alternate representative of Paraguay at this organization for 5 years, after which as a foreign minister and in other capacities, I have had occasion to be at this organization numerous times, and it's always a special event for me to be here. I feel back at home again whenever I'm here, and I would remind you, at the time it was a smaller room, but there we met with the same conviction and rigor that we do today. So, Permanent Representative of Chile at the Organization of American States, Tomás Ignacio Enrique, President of the Permanent Council, Secretary General, Albert Ramdin, Assistant Secretary, Assistant Secretary, members of the Permanent Council, and authorities who are here with us today. It's an honor for me to address you as the chief of the EOM of the OAS to address the general elections held in Honduras. The mission has followed up starting before March 9th of this year, when we in OAS sent a technical visit observing the primary elections in Honduras. And at the end of July, there was held a preliminary visit to the country, and after observing the elections on November 30th, EOM continues to be on the ground in the country. We also observed the elections of December 7th in San Antonio, Flores, which had been put off for technical reasons and was not held on November 30th. Now, throughout the year, the mission has met with the candidates, political players, electoral authorities, government, and other institutions of the state, as well as with representatives of civil society organizations, international organizations, and academia to hear their different perspectives on the elections based on the meetings with a host of voices, the analysis that we undertook of the exhaustive analysis of the rules and observing the elections itself. We continue engaged in a comprehensive analysis of the entire electoral process, upkeeping the principles of objectivity, neutrality, and not meddling in domestic affairs and domestic law, upholding transparency and independence, among other principles that govern the work of electoral observation missions of the OAS. The election, from the outset, there were conflicts between some of the people on the electoral tribunal and the electoral court, as you know. In comparison with the prior elections held there, the mission observed backsliding in technical aspects, as well as the governance of the court and of the council. In a structural way, it seems to be the party structure of the electoral authorities that would explain part of the setbacks and the difficulties in the current election process. These domestic or internal conflicts led to the late application of certain protocols and rules that jeopardize the compliance of the schedule of the elections, giving rise to uncertainty among the citizenry about the holding of the elections. The development of the pre- and post-election stages show that the Honduran electoral authorities made frequent use or put their party interests above the success of the elections. Now, EOM saw messages circulating about fraud throughout the election process, coming from the opposition, from the ruling party, as well as from some of the electoral authorities, which caused much harm to the democratic process and the election itself. Prior missions of the U.S. had already observed similar situations, and we regret that the election process and their authorities have not been able to overcome their partisanship, but to ensure that there be professional and technically autonomous election. 101 observers from 19 different countries visited 780 different electoral boards and 300 and some polling stations of the 18 different departments Honduras. The EOM of the OAS was able to ascertain that the elections were transpired with a high, under normal circumstances, the high turnout, save some areas of the country in which some of the EOM work were not able to do the work as a result of activity from the armed forces that was denounced and addressed. The civic spirit of Hondurans on November 30th and December 7th contrasts with the developments of the post-electoral period in which the mission has been observing 24 hours a day at the center of the electoral location where the tallies are taking place. The team of engineers of the EOM have seen delays in how the electoral material is being handled, how it was sent out, and a lack of rigor and expertise in how they are viewed to ensure the proper processing of the electoral material, but they have not observed any intentional manipulation of the material or of the computer system. So we have seen some delays, but that does not show, or nothing that makes us doubt the results. These delays have led to uncertainty, something that is common in any election. That uncertainty has led to speculation. This is problematic in any election, but even more so in a situation in which we have an election that's very close, very tight. If you look at the statistics that the observers have seen at the different electoral boards that we have observed. Now, while the technological tools can be very helpful to speed up the counting or tally process and arriving at totals, it's the physical tally sheets that actually contain the results. That's what matters. And on that matter, the mission thinks that the proper use of these tools does not in and of itself lead or mean that there should be any thought of fraud. And to this effect, it's very important to stress that it's the logistical electoral center where the counting is taking place, forging ahead with the special counting or tallying of the votes according to the rules. The electoral authorities are still working within the legal deadlines so that they can issue an official result. I should also remind everyone that that legislation also provides what resources exist or what legal recourse exists for contesting of results, and there are mechanisms for finding inconsistencies in the count. The specific legislation is very clear, stating clearly that the electoral authorities are the ones charged with issuing any statements about the results of the elections. No other state authority is authorized to ascertain the validity of the elections. We make a call, an urgent call to the election authorities that they proceed with the special count and that they seek out all possible means to obtain the official results as quickly as possible. At the same time, we urge the leaders and representatives of the different political forces to act responsibly and to set aside any delay tactics that could sabotage the process. Delays in the processing and the publication of results is not justified. The electoral authority should make decisions in an expedited way, speeding up the process, because at this point in time it is unacceptable that there be any delays. The population needs to be to rest assured that the Electoral Council is fulfilling fully its responsibility, the civic responsibility of the people of Honduras and that of some political bodies and civil society organizations. They stand by waiting for the definitive results of this election. At the same time, EOM rejects any call that would lead to disruptions in public order that could cause any disruptions in this last phase. Last Thursday, EOM, along with other representatives of international communities and other observers in Honduras, was invited to a meeting with the President of the National Congress, who presented his viewpoint and possible courses of action. The mission sees with much concern those statements saying that the elections should be annulled. It doesn't have the authority to do that, and that jeopardizes the respect to the popular will expressed in their vote. EOM is grateful for the interest of the international community in the elections held in Honduras and the support it has offered to allow for the observation mission to carry out its functions. And we make a call for regional leaders to continue calling for strict adherence to law so that we can strengthen the rule of law in Honduras. Lastly, our EOM reiterates its call for electoral authorities to streamline the remaining processes upholding the political rights of everyone involved in the election and of citizens pursuant to applicable legislation and the deadlines therein, and that it be done with the utmost transparency. Ladies and gentlemen, just as I have said, the elections in Honduras on November 30th, these elections were far from being perfect. However, Hondurans did show up at the polling places to express their will, and that needs to be respected. Given that situation, the mission thinks it's absolutely necessary for concrete initiatives to be adopted to ensure that those situations we have observed not be repeated. We reiterate our commitment to continue supporting Honduras in its path toward holding more professional, efficient, or effective and sound elections. I would also like to offer special thanks for the financial support offered by Brazil, Canada, Chile, Korea, Spain, the U.S., France, Italy, Netherlands, Peru, the Dominican Republic, Switzerland, which made the work of the mission possible. To conclude, I would like to thank the Secretary General for the trust he placed in me to preside over this EOM and underscore the commitment that I have observed once again at this organization of the observers, men and women, who have been working very hard to carry out their role, their function in the 18 different departments of Honduras, also the professionalism of the Secretariat for the strengthening of democracy and cooperation on electoral matters, and the whole team. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias por la información.
I thank you for that information, Mr. Loizaga, for that very thorough report and for putting to the consideration of this Permanent Council the information that you have shared with us, about which we have taken due note. Next, I offer the floor to those delegations who would like to refer to this topic. And I'm happy to greet and to give the floor to Ambassador Gerardo Torres, the Undersecretary of the State in the Office of Foreign Relations and International Cooperation. After hearing from the Undersecretary, then we'll give the floor to the Foreign Minister of Honduras. You have the floor, sir. I am the Ambassador Quesada. I would like to start by congratulating Chile, because yesterday Chile held its elections, and in 2 hours the votes were counted, and there was no meddling from abroad that we are aware of. Now, the elections of 2017 of Honduras were a fraud, and everyone knows that here, though, it's fully documented. In fact, now, knowing that, I can say that the Foreign Secretary of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro, with whom I spoke, and also with Francisco Guerrero, who now holds that position, as Sebastián Grekovich, and Gerardo, all bore witness directly to the fraud, not as colossal as what we're seeing right now, but so this is of public knowledge, public domain. Let's not overlook that, and the Vice Minister can address that. Now, as far as colleagues who are here right now, who are concerned about all of these matters, I know that this falls to us. We are like Whoopi Goldberg's film, we are mediums, so to speak, and there are those who are capable of insulting people they don't know based on gossip and social media messages, as we have seen a gentleman that doesn't bear mentioning, like said by Julio Cortázar, but it's about defaming people we don't even know.
And so to continue, the Deputy Foreign Minister, my dear friend, journalist Gerardo Torres, please go ahead. Thank you very much, Ambassador Quesada. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Greetings to the Chair of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Tomas Pascual, the Ambassador Albert Ramdin, Secretary General of the OAS. Also warm greetings to the former Foreign Minister of Paraguay, Eladio Loizaga. And thank you very much for being with us here and during the mission in Honduras. I just wanted to share a few things, Foreign Minister, with all due respect, and that is that we believe that this is very alarming and something that's happening again and again when we are looking at direct interference into Honduran democracy. I'll speak about that more later on. Also, the issue of violence. Violence is growing and a serious problem, as well as the type of intimidating, threatening messages from gangs and criminal groups who have been turning to coercion. And also you talked, Foreign Minister, about the issue of technical issues which have an impact on the result. And we need to say that those technical issues are due to the transmission issue of sharing the results, which is exactly what creates this perception. And I can assure you that yesterday in Chilean elections, it was impossible to count all of those ballots, and yet there are technical abilities to ensure that the population is aware of the result. And so in Honduras, we have those technical abilities, which you stated they have indeed failed. They do have an impact on the Honduran population because of the perception it gives when it comes to provable legal facts, and that system is trying to be sold as the reality when that is not in fact the case. However, just 3 weeks ago, I was here in this very room, Simón Bolívar, where we stated that there were threats underway, but that the threats to the electoral process in Honduras did not come from the President Xiomara Castro or her government, but they were done with the intention of manipulating the transmission system. And what was done, and Ambassador Quesada got ahead of me here, and the Argentine ambassador was disqualifying this and gave this as an example. And in the end, this was something that was true, because the foreign minister can certainly say that in our case, the system failed completely. From the over 19,000 ballots counted in the elections, 14,000 did not have biometrics. That is, we cannot prove if those votes actually correspond to persons who went to the polls, because one day before, there were two advisors from CNN who said that the biometrics were not obligatory. Also, over 1,800 additional ballots do not have signatures, or they simply were not received. And these are technical issues, as were described very superficially, describe 88%, that is 17,036 tallies from over 19,000, which are presenting inconsistencies. And so what does this mean? It means that the system for transmitting the results needs to be regulated by 3 different parties that need to go into the system. They need to coordinate to do this. However, we have seen time and again that then there are external manipulations of this information system, and they changed the source codes. And so the tallies that were submitted, that were presented to the people of Honduras, have been falsified and manipulated, as noted by Advisor Ochoa. 2 weeks have passed since the elections in Honduras, and we still have not been able to say who won them. 3 of 4 participating parties have said that they do not trust in the process, and that is the transmission of the results and the fact that on the computer the tallies say one thing and then the physical tallies say another thing. And now they are calling, this electoral commission is calling for a special recount, given that 88% are presenting inconsistencies. 5% of the physical copies have been reviewed and the rest have been accepted digitally. 3 of the 4 parties say they do not trust, and 3 of the 4 parties have talked about the possibility or the evidence of a potential electoral coup, not just the party that is currently incumbent. And we are looking at threats, international coercion, threats against the people of Honduras. The Libre Party has talked about the nullity of these elections because of this. And this, of course, is not up to the central government or the administration, but rather the electoral authorities. On October 31st, as you are all aware, the Attorney General's office in Honduras presented the tallies, and they talked about a situation that's very similar to what is happening right now. And in the audio recordings, the advisors talked about the nullity of these elections. And so I just wanted to remind you of this fact. This is something that we have heard, and I heard it again now. I also wanted to share with you that the day after I was here, which was on November 25th, during a session where we were invited to speak about our concern with regard to the Honduran elections, the very next day, the President of the United States, Donald Trump, used social media in order to send a message to the people of Honduras in which he stated that they had to vote for the Nacional Party candidate, Asfura, and not to vote for the Socialist Party, Moncada, or for Nasraya. And that if they did not vote for Asfura, Honduras would no longer be our friend. They would not work with us. And then the chief of state of the United States the very next day repeated this message, also adding that he was going to pardon former President Orlando Hernandez, who was sentenced to 45 years of imprisonment in the United States for drug trafficking, for sending over 400 tons of cocaine illegally to this very country, and having coordinated through the sale of drugs through the president's office in Honduras. And President Hernandez turned Honduras into the most violent country in the entire region during his presidency. After the election, just 1 day later, President Trump made a 3rd post on the internet stating that he was demanding that his orders be fulfilled, that the president of Honduras be Asfura, and we believe this was very serious. It was not noted in the OAS report. Immediately after the first announcement from President Trump in Honduras, we saw criminal groups who coordinated with President Hernandez, and they began engaging in intimidation. In just 72 hours, we noted over 3,000 intimidating messages. On the election day its own, we saw close to 1,000 reports of threats in schools where people were being threatened to vote for the National Party candidate Asfura. Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of governments and the peoples of the Americas, I'd like to take this opportunity to remind all of you of what the OAS Charter says from 1948 in its Article 19. No state or group of states has the right. Undersecretary, I'll give you 1 more minute to conclude your intervention. Thank you, Chair. No state or group of states has the right to directly or indirectly interfere for any reason in the domestic affairs of any other state. And I'd like to take this opportunity to support myself with the Inter-American Democratic Charter, Articles 17, 18, 19, and 20. And I'd like to ask you, based on that, very respectfully, Secretary General and the Permanent Council, to study the possibly convening a special session of the General Assembly and taking diplomatic measures as necessary in order to address this aggression of one member state of this organization against Honduras from another member state. And so we will not be quiet, as stated by Dylan Thomas. We will not deliver ourselves so docilely to this dark night. I conclude my intervention, and thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a la representante.
Thank you to the representation of Honduras for your intervention. And now we will give the floor to the member states, starting with the Dominican Republic, which is with us remotely. Foreign Minister Alvarez.
Ahí está.
Good morning, Foreign Minister. I give you the floor. Please go ahead. Thank you very much. Chair of the Permanent Council, Secretary General, ASG, Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, Chief of the OAS EOM in Honduras, dear colleagues, thank you very much to Ambassador Eladio Loizaga for the report that was presented with regard to the electoral situation in the Republic of Honduras, with the aim of discussing the general elections held on November 30th last. And we recognize the professional, technical, and impartial efforts carried out by the EOM. And we also salute the work carried out by the EU EOM. That support was a significant contribution to the credibility and strengthening of the democratic processes. We'd also like to recognize the people of Honduras who peacefully and massively went to the polls. This civic participation is a very clear mandate that should be heard and respected. The popular will expressed at the polls is an essential tenet of any democracy and requires full respect from all stakeholders involved. We are motivated by our staunch commitment to democracy and with a spirit of hemispheric solidarity as the Dominican Republic requested convening this special session. Interpreter notes the microphone has gone out. Microphone? Interpreter notes we have no sound. All democracy in our hemisphere, the Dominican Republic recognizes the valuable contributions which for over 60 years now have included technical support and recommendations from these missions to contribute to institutional strengthening in the Dominican Republic when it comes to our elections. And against that backdrop, the report presented is a very valuable input when it comes to assessing the situation, and as is necessary to guide any additional support, always within the legal and political framework of the OAS. We reiterate our full support to the OAS EOM in Honduras, and we greatly value that the mission is continuing to be present on the ground in contact with all political and institutional stakeholders, collecting first-hand information. And we also believe it is imperative to continue counting on unlimited access throughout the entire phases of this election, and also keeping this Permanent Council informed in a timely fashion. In light of the report presented, the Dominican Republic observes with great concern the public statements stemming from various powers of the Honduran government, which aim to delegitimize the electoral process, which is still underway. We also clearly remind you that the National Electoral Council is the only constitutional authority that has the legal capacity to administer an election, resolve any disputes, and proclaim the official results. No other state body, no other political stakeholder at all has the authority to substitute, condition, or anticipate any decisions which exclusively and solely fall on the electoral authority. Pursuant to the Inter-American Democratic Charter, access and exercise of political power is only legitimate through free, fair, transparent elections. And that is why any attempt to fail to recognize, alter, or condition the results stemming from the sovereign will of the Honduran people once the legal phases of the electoral process have concluded, will be a breakdown of the democratic order with implications which cannot be ignored by this permanent council nor by the hemispheric community. Therefore, it is unacceptable for the National Electoral Council to be subject to political pressure or institutional or media pressure aimed at interfering in fulfilling its obligations. The election must be carried out and concluded within the legal timeframes with full independence and without any type of interference. Democratic stability in Honduras demands that all state institutions, without exception, follow the rules of the democratic game which were previously established and accepted by all of the stakeholders. We are urgently calling for calm and political responsibility as well as institutional prudence, and we remind you that social peace must prevail over any party interests. We underscore the importance of maintaining the integrity of the electoral materials and ensuring that the police forces continue to carry out their constitutional duty of supporting the election. Democracy and the rule of law are sustained by due process and evidence, not by media statements. Any reports or failure to comply must be sent through the appropriate institutional channels pursuant to any mechanisms set out in Honduran legislation. We staunchly believe that democracy is the result of a gradual evolution of rules, practices, and institutions which make it possible to peacefully express social diversity channeled through an election in which the majority will shall prevail, always within the scope of the rule of law. The standards adopted with consensus in advance must be unaltered throughout the entire process and respected by all of the stakeholders from the beginning all the way to its official conclusion. Finally, the Dominican Republic reiterates its strong, unequivocal commitment to the principles of the Inter-American Democratic Charter and with defense of the democratic institutionality of our region. This permanent council must remain alert, vigilant, and willing to act in the framework of its competency in the face of any missteps that compromise the integrity of the elections in Honduras. And the sovereign will of the people of Honduras expressed at the polls is non-negotiable. It does not allow any reinterpretations, and it may not be replaced by any type of pressure. Its full respect is a democratic obligation and not a political option. Thank you very much. Thank you very much to the Foreign Minister for your intervention in this session, and also thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you very much to the members for granting those 2 exceptions for the time limit on those interventions. And now we will hear from the member states in order of request of the floor. Antigua and Barbuda, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, colleagues. Antigua and Barbuda thanks Ambassador Eladio Loaizaga for his briefing, and we take note of the comprehensive information provided by the Electoral Observation Mission concerning the general election held in Honduras on November 30th, 2025. We underscore that it is in the interest of the people of Honduras and of the country's economic and social stability that the electoral process be widely regarded as free, fair, and credible. Such confidence is essential to enable an incoming government to exercise its mandate effectively and to implement policy decisions that command the support of the majority of the electorate. We recall that the guidelines of Honduras establish December 30th, 2025 as the deadline for the official declaration of electoral results. In that context, time is now a critical factor. It is therefore essential that all tally sheets that are being questioned be carefully reviewed and, where necessary, recounted within the remaining time frame. At the same time, we underscore the importance of avoiding unsubstantiated allegations in public discourse. We listened carefully to the remarks of Ambassador Loizaga and the indications that he made, which suggested that more than 100 observers observed these elections and found no instance of fraud. Such allegations, therefore, further erode confidence in the electoral process, and they should stop. Across the member states of this organization, adherence to democratic principles, including free and fair elections, respect for constitutional order and the rule of law, constitutes a shared standard that defines our hemisphere. These principles not only underpin domestic governance, but also shape how our region is viewed and engaged by the wider international community. In that context, we value and commend the role of the Department of Electoral Cooperation and Observation of the OAS in accompanying electoral processes, and particularly in supporting Honduras in upholding these common commitments. Antigua and Barbuda, Mr. Chairman, will continue to support all constructive efforts aimed at bringing the electoral process to a clear, credible, and widely accepted conclusion. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias a la delegación.
Thank you very much to Antigua and Barbuda, Ambassador. Peru is recognized. Chair, thank you for convening this special session at the initiative of the Dominican Republic. Peru has joined with the aim of receiving information on the recent elections held on November 30th in Honduras. Thank you very much to Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, the head of the EOM from the OAS, for his presentation. And also thank you very much to the mission he leads for the work carried out in Honduras. The EOMs are one of the most meaningful contributions that the OAS has to strengthening democracy in our hemisphere, and its background has shown the ability to support member states with technical rigor, impartiality, and respect for national sovereignty. They are a mechanism which has contributed to strengthening electoral institutions and leading to greater legitimacy and certainty in elections throughout our region. Peru is honored to be one of the countries that has voluntarily contributed to those missions. In that sense, we greatly value the call from the EOM to respect the legal proceedings of the process, ensure transparency and traceability of the various phases of the election, and avoiding any actions which may cause undue pressure on the electoral authorities or impact public order. Pursuant to the legal framework in Honduras, the National Electoral Council is the appropriate authority to ensuring that this process is carried out, resolving any conflicts, and evaluating the official results pursuant to international standards. Finally, Peru expresses its trust in that the Honduran electoral process will move forward to its culmination in a climate of peace, institutional respect, and attachment to the rule of law. We reiterate our support for the support provided by this organization through its EOM pursuant to the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador, for your presentation. Paraguay is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair. Distinguished colleagues, my delegation would like to thank you for convening this special session to reflect the collective commitment of our states to preserving democratic institutionality in our hemisphere. Similarly, we would like to express our thanks to the Chief of the Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS in Honduras, Ambassador Eladio Loiziaga, for presenting the report on the current situation in the electoral process in Honduras, as well as for the professionalism, technical rigor with which the mission carried out its work on the ground. Paraguay has joined this call due to our genuine and deep concern with the delicate situation faced by the sisterly Republic of Honduras following the general elections held on November 30th last. Against that backdrop, we would like to recognize and value the civic and responsible behavior of the people of Honduras throughout that election day, which was held normally and without any credible incidents to indicate otherwise. We reiterate the democratic vocation of the people of Honduras, and that goes even for moments of political tension. We, however, do note with great attention the institutional challenges noted throughout the electoral process, as well as the public controversy with regard to the preliminary results. For Paraguay, it's fundamental that the appropriate authorities are able to exercise their duties independently with transparency and attachment to the legal framework in force. In that sense, we would like to express our full support for the work of the EOM from the OAS. Its presence is an essential component to strengthening citizens' trust and the integrity of the process. With regard to that, we underscore the communique sent by the mission on December 10th, 2025, through which they categorically rejected any call for changing public order, underscoring the need to ensuring social peace and institutionality as well as democracy. We would also like to add some brief historic context. The OAS has supported elections in Honduras for over 40 years now, contributing to strengthening democratic practices, promoting transparency, and facilitating peaceful conflict resolution. That goes even for times of complexity, and this trajectory reflects the trust in our organization and the shared conviction that EOMs are an indispensable tool for strengthening democracy in the region. Paraguay reiterates its support for the continuity of those missions as a technical tool and not a source of intervention to assist member states. Along those lines, we reiterate the importance with respecting the electoral results stemming from the appropriate bodies, and the democratic legitimacy is based on popular will expressed at the polls and the independence of those who manage electoral justice. Preserving this balance of the institutions is essential to ensuring social cohesion as well as peaceful coexistence. Therefore, we reiterate our respectful but firm call that all political stakeholders turn to dialogue, legality, and prudence. And we remind you all that democracy requires shared responsibility, particularly during moments of uncertainty. Therefore, we believe it's important that the appropriate authorities move forward in concluding the count and the official communication of the results in order to provide tranquility for the people and strengthening citizens' trust in their democratic system as well as the veracity of the election. Unnecessarily prolonging these processes may lead to institutional mistrust and cause tensions that we must at all costs avoid. The successful culmination of this election process is cross-cutting for Honduras, as the entire region is closely watching right now, and we see that there are challenges faced by our democracies in a global context marked by increasing polarization and disinformation. Against that backdrop, and with full respect for the sovereignty and independence of the Republic of Honduras, Paraguay reiterates the importance of preserving the democratic legitimacy as well as social cohesion as indispensable tenets for prosperity and sustainable development in our nations. Finally, the Republic of Paraguay reiterates its commitment to the principles enshrined in the OAS Charter and the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We will continue to support you with a constructive spirit throughout every effort aimed at strengthening democratic institutions in Honduras and the region. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias,
Thank you, Ambassador, for your intervention. Panama has the floor. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Republic of Panama would like to express thanks for the convening of this special session of the Permanent Council, held at the behest of a significant number of member states with the purpose of responsibly, constructively thinking about the general elections held on November 30th in our sister Republic of Honduras. As this Permanent Council knows, the Organization of American States was present at said elections through an electoral observation mission headed up by Ambassador Eladio Loizaga. Panama appreciates deeply the technical, impartial, and very professional work carried out by the EOM, and we await with much interest for the final report that will enable us to clearly understand what transpired during the election and thereby contribute to the transparency and the knowledge of the elections. From this standpoint, Panama has issued important statements within the framework of the Partnership for Development of Democracy, reasserting our commitment to the Inter-American Charter that there be verifiable, free, and fair elections. And so there was some concern raised regarding statements calling for the annulment of the elections without exhausting institutional mechanisms provided for in law. So we face, Mr. Chairman, a challenge that goes beyond national borders and puts to the test the strength of democracy in our hemisphere and the credibility of the inter-American system. The OAS has shown how important it is and its ability to act at a complex time, acting very prudently with resolve. Our attention now is focused on Honduras. Millions of citizens wait with bated breath for the counting of the ballots by the Council, which has the legal authority to count the ballots. Panama thinks it is very important for this counting to be carried out quickly in keeping with law without any type of pressure brought to bear. I should point out that the elections were held in a peaceful, orderly way with a good showing of the electorate. However, some questions have been brought regarding the counting of some of the tally sheets, as well as some accusations of fraud, without there being sufficient evidence to substantiate those allegations. And so any intervention that runs counter to the principles of elections are not acceptable. We call upon the electoral authorities to swiftly and technically and with rigor to carry out their functions, and also political actors. We also call to uphold the democratic principles and the law. Now, elections are some of the highest and greatest manifestations of a people's will, and the respect thereof is essential, and that means that those elected will have the legitimacy to govern. And Mr. Chairman, colleagues, Panama eagerly awaits a report of the EOM of the OAS once issued with the corresponding technical guarantees. Our country reiterates that it will play a constructive role in upholding the exercise of the election rights, regardless of who wins, always with the full respect for the sovereignty of the people and in keeping with the democratic charter. We reassert our trust in the inter-American system and to step in at decisive moments when called for, and also we should continue strengthening democracy in our hemisphere. Thank you, Ambassador, for your intervention. Mexico has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished heads of delegation, Secretary General. The delegation of Mexico greets the Ambassador Gerardo Torres, Foreign Minister of Honduras, and we're grateful for convening this meeting for us to hear the report of the EOM on Honduras, and we also greet Eladio Loizaga, chief of that mission. Mexico recognizes the citizenry of Honduras for having exercised their right to vote. We adhere to the constitutional principles that historically have set our or distinguished our foreign policy: respect for the self-determination of peoples, non-intervention, peaceful solution of controversies, and banning or any type of meddling in international and domestic affairs. Now, our president has addressed the importance of upholding a democracy and international law. Within this framework, we sustain that the right to vote should be fully upheld and guaranteed without any type of exclusions, persecutions, divisions. Mexico promotes the EOM, and we welcome the EOM, so we see that as a necessary tool to strengthen processes and to generate trust, instill trust, but we do agree that we need to recognize that the EOM should never be used as any type of mechanism for polarization, political polarization, confrontation, or interventionism. We make vows that the EOM can operate technically only, avoiding taking any type of stance that could be interpreted as interference in the elections in Honduras. We reiterate that it falls to the national authorities of Honduras to determine what the proper mechanisms ought to be to overcome any difference or conflict that might arise in keeping with its own constitution and international law. As regards the elections held in Honduras, Mexico makes a respectful call that the election process be carried out orderly. We recognize the responsibility that falls to the election authorities to make sure that the popular will expressed in the polls be upheld and preserved. We trust that Honduran political forces will place the national interest above their own and will leave it to institutions to overcome any differences. We make a respectful call to all political and social actors in Honduras to behave responsibly and to avoid any act of violence or any type of confrontation that could lead to social unrest. Mexico will eagerly await the final results from the understanding that it falls exclusively to the national competent authorities to certify the results in keeping with domestic law and the sovereign will as expressed by the people of Honduras without any type of outside interference. Only through mutual respect, dialogue, and adherence to the rule of law can we strengthen peace, governance, and the well-being of our region. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Belize has the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Secretary General, Madam Assistant Secretary General, esteemed ambassadors and colleagues. The delegation of Belize thanks Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, head of the OAS Electoral Observation Mission to Honduras, for the diligent work carried out by the mission in observing the electoral process and for the presentation of its status report to this Council. We also express our appreciation to the Organization of American States for its continued commitment to supporting member states through the deployment of professional and impartial electoral observation missions, which contribute meaningfully to confidence in democratic processes. Mr. Chair, Belize has listened carefully to the status report and findings contained in the report of the Electoral Observation Mission, which provide valuable insight into the conduct of the electoral process in Honduras. In this regard, Belize wishes to reiterate its firm and unwavering support for free, fair, and transparent elections, conducted in an environment free from any undue internal or external influence. These principles are at the very core of representative democracy and are guaranteed in the Inter-American Democratic Charter. Belize underscores the importance of allowing the electoral process to take its full course, including the exhaustion of all avenues and remedies provided for under the Constitution and legal framework of Honduras, to guarantee both the protection and fulfillment of the will of the Honduran people. Respect for institutional processes and the rule of law remains essential to safeguarding democratic legitimacy and public trust. Finally, Belize notes that this moment represents an important juncture in Honduras's democratic process. Accordingly, Belize is observing developments in the country closely and encourages all stakeholders in the election process, as well as fellow member states of the organization, to lend their full support to efforts aimed at preserving peace and stability, and to ensuring a peaceful and democratic transfer of power, respectful of the will of the Honduran people. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Muchas gracias, embajador.
Thank you, Ambassador. Brazil has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would like to thank Ambassador Eladio Losaiga for his preliminary report and for the work that he's been carrying out in Honduras. Heading up the Electoral Observation Mission, Brazil reiterates that democracy is a basic principle for our region, a structuring underpinning issue also of the Inter-American Charter. Now, in this council, some days back, we reasserted our trust and full respect for the elections in Honduras, civil liberties, and the autonomous actions carried out by local authorities. We reiterate now, in this spirit, we proclaim all of the political actors in Honduras. We call upon them, rather, to act with moderation, serenity, and responsibility. The soundness of democracy calls for any type of doubt or allegations issued to be dealt with by those institutions that are provided for by the Constitution of Honduras with full respect for due process. The sovereign will of the Honduran people should be expressed freely, peacefully, and without any constraints or pressures brought to bear. The electoral authorities need to be able to carry out their functions free of any type of outside meddling or pressures or politicization, keeping pursuant to their authority. That's the only way and the only condition for the results ultimately to be considered legitimate and accepted. We call upon the Honduran authorities to be responsible and transparent and respectful in the way they conduct the remaining process in the count, and also all of the political leaders and other authorities. We would call upon you to observe a civic approach to this, and that the counting be done in an impartial way. We encourage all of the parties to await for the conclusion of the counting of the votes and to adhere to the preliminary results. And now the autonomy of peoples is underpinning of the region. Only the Honduran people can decide or what the path their democracy is going to go down on their own. And we should not there should not be any worsening of the current situation, and we need to approach this with a sober attitude and with the sufficient technical support and serenity. Will this final process be carried out with responsibility to allow for the popular vote to be clearly, peacefully expressed and not called into question? Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Bolivia is recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're grateful for this special session having been convened because it enables us to directly hear from the head of the EOM, Eladio Loizaga, about the current election situation in Honduras. Bolivia has paid close attention, and although with some concern as this process is played out, because what happens in Honduras is not a trifold matter, it's not an isolated matter, it's a mirror that reminds us of the fragility and also the strength of democracy in Latin America. As Ambassador Loizaga has told us, elections there was much polarization in how the elections were held, especially in the counting, and that has given rise to even greater attention. And there have been some logistical delays that have been a concern. The most important thing is that the elections themselves were carried out normally. Given that situation, Bolivia's message is clear. Respect for popular will is the only legitimate foundation on which a democratic government can be erected. We make a respectful call to the National Electoral Council and to all Honduran institutions with a responsible role to carry out to do their work with transparency, diligence, and responsibility. Each vote needs to be counted. Every inconsistency needs to be looked into carefully. There should not be any doubts remaining about the veracity of the results. The citizens require this, and democracy also requires that the process be something that can be audited and inspire trust in all of the actors involved. We reiterate our call to respect the definitive results once the accounting process is concluded within the deadline. We also express thanks for the very important work carried out by the Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS. Thank you very much. Thank you, Bolivia. Uruguay is recognized. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary General, the ASG, distinguished colleagues, delegates. Uruguay is very happy that this special meeting of the Permanent Council was convened with the purpose of receiving information about the elections and the Electoral Observation Mission in Honduras. We are grateful that the foreign minister former foreign minister of Honduras is here. Our country has closely watched the elections held in Honduras. We have seen the EOM's work there. We've taken note of the communique issued on December 10th by that EOM, as well as other international statements that have been made. The update that we've just received by Ambassador Loizaga calls our attention to the fact of how there was partisan activity in this very critical juncture in Honduras. On that, we reassert the important role of EOM, and we express thanks for the work that is carried out. As technical work is absolutely necessary to ensure that the Honduran population can be certain that their will, as expressed in the polling place, will be respected, and that international or that concrete or legitimate information be provided to the international community regarding the elections as asserted by EOM. So all of this or democracy is only strengthened by impartial votes, and the institutions and the whole concept of accountability itself are strengthened by strict adherence to the principles enshrined in the OAS Charter and Democratic Charter. We have called to all Honduran parties to be very cautious and to wait for the final count of the votes within the deadline stipulated before deciding on any course of action. We also underscore the need to make sure that electoral authorities will be allowed to act independently so that they can duly carry out their roles with the necessary guarantees, ensuring that all the candidates have their guarantees upheld. We reiterate our position to contribute to the extent that we can with strict adherence to the norms and principles of international law to any efforts that would promote democracy and to ensure the respect for the popular will of the Honduran people. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. Chile has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chile would like to express thanks to those who convened this special meeting and allowing for the chief of the EOM to report on the elections held in Honduras. We also thank the delegation of Honduras for it taking part in this session through the Undersecretary of State and the Foreign Office in International Cooperation, which shows how open it is to this venue for us to address very important topics. Our country hopes that the regional efforts to contribute to the proper carrying out of these elections be done with respect and according to the institutions, avoiding any type of placing a particular private interests over that of the country. We also think it's very important that the EOM of the OAS continue to carry out its work, staying abreast and closely observing developments in Honduras, ready to ease the way toward a dialogue that will ensure that that Honduras be able to usher in its new president without any type of outside interference. We reiterate our call to all of the parties involved to continuing to work together to make sure that the result of this election be the true reflection of the popular will as expressed in the polls. On November 30th, our country makes itself available to offer its support in any process that would lead to strengthening democracy in the region through the necessary channels and such that we not weaken the trust that people have in the institutions and also to uphold people's will. Thank you. Costa Rica has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, distinguished representatives. Costa Rica is grateful for the convening of this special session to address the elections in Honduras. We appreciate the opportunity to receive information from Mr. Eladio Loizaga, Chief of the EOM of the OAS, whose technical effort is an essential pillar for us to fully understand and take stock of what transpired during the elections. My country would like to express its view that given any uncertainty or tension after elections, it's necessary for everything done to be done with the utmost respect to the Constitution. That includes procedures and deadlines established by the electoral authorities and also allowing those bodies that administer the election be allowed to do so fully to ensure the legitimacy of the results and of democracy itself. And so we call upon the National Electoral Council to strictly adhere to the electoral law regarding the deadlines for declaring the results pursuant to what the law in Honduras calls for. We underscore that any action or declaration that could give rise to uncertainty, undermine stability of institutions, should be avoided. The priority should be to make sure that the process move ahead with strict adherence to the rules and transparency, thereby protecting the integrity of the vote and the trust of citizens in their electoral institutions. We underscore that democracy can only be strengthened through free, peaceful, verifiable elections that are also independently audited. That's all necessary to make sure that the popular will be respected entirely. We reiterate, as we have said in prior statements, that the EOM missions are a public good offered by the OAS and its presence on the ground, its technical work, and its timely communications of its work all instill trust, protecting the work of the institutions on the ground and the very responsible and prudent work done by EOM in Honduras is noteworthy. Mr. Chairman, this organization's observance of elections should be rooted in the belief of protecting and respecting the popular will of any country, in this case Honduras, that's necessary for there to be social peace, governance, and stability of our country's democracies. We assert our unwavering commitment to the Inter-American Democratic Charter and the principles that encourage and inspire the work of the OAS in any process that would lead to the legal, peaceful, institutional solution to the current issue. Thank you, Costa Rica. Guatemala has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Guatemala is also grateful for the convening of this special meeting of the Permanent Council to receive information from the Electoral Observation Mission of the OAS about the general elections held November 30th in Honduras. Guatemala would like to recognize the massive showing of the Honduran people that took to the polls during an election day described by the EOM as peaceful. The commitment of the citizens to carry out, exercise their right to vote is an expression of civic responsibility, maturity, and deserves to be recognized by all of us. We would also like to express our thanks to Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, Chief of Mission, and all the observers, ladies and gentlemen, of the 19 countries that spread out across the 18 departments, meeting at different polling places. From the opening of the polls until they were closed, they were there, as well as they are supporting or observing the tallying of the votes. This is independent work that strengthens democracy and promotes trust, political trust in the elections. We have taken due note of the information received and of the main findings presented by the EOM in the prior stage and during the election itself, as well as afterwards. We share in that which has been said about the autonomy and safety of electoral authorities and those bodies responsible for holding the elections. Those actions called for by the public ministry weaken the autonomy of the electoral authorities and jeopardize their personal integrity and that of their families. Actions and statements that lead to destabilization or any type of disruption of the public order or delays in the processing and transmitting of the results is of concern. In this context, we reiterate the expectation that laws be upheld and that the official results be published as issued by the EOM with the council rather, in order to uphold people's trust in the election institutions. In this post-election period, make a call for prudence and calm and respect for institutions. With such tight results and all the technical glitches there have been, calls upon all political and social actors to be very responsible and careful, moderate, and that they adhere to the rule of law. We reiterate that the proper way to address any discrepancy is that which is called for by the legislation and all the competent authorities, and to avoid any type of strife in the streets or the besmirching of the electoral process. We call upon everyone to abide by the law and to refrain from any harmful speech, be it in public venues or on social media. That's all harmful. And so the observation that was done at the behest of Honduras authorities, this is a tool that only strengthens democracy. The presence of EOM in Honduras stems from that spirit, according to Article 24 of the Inter-American Democratic Charter. That's why we urge that the mission continue to be given all of the guarantees of security, access, information, and collaboration they need for them to fully carry out their mandate until this process is over. We also make a call to the National Electoral Council to speed up and streamline the counting and making sure that it be done in a transparent way. We exhort authorities, parties, candidates, and everyone else to await the results and to be vigilant about the counting process as it plays out, and to respect the will of the people as expressed in the polls. Guatemala reiterates its solidarity with Honduras. We trust that through the respect for institutions, dialogue, adherence to law, the election will be concluded or in an orderly way, preserving political stability and democratic coexistence. We support the efforts put forward by the Organization of American States to promote and defend democracy in the region, always rooted in the respect for sovereignty, non-intervention, and peaceful solution of conflict. Thank you. Thank you, Ambassador. The U.S. has the floor.
Thank you, Chair. The November 30 elections in Honduras were widely viewed as a success and an example in the region, with a high voter turnout and peaceful participation despite a highly polarized environment. The OAS Electoral Observation Mission commended the Honduran people for a calm, participatory election day, and as we have heard this morning, remains on the ground observing the post-election phase. In an extremely close race, it is essential that the National Electoral Council be able to perform its duties free from threat and pressure. The OAS, which has stressed the independence of electoral authorities and the need to do them do their work without interference. The OAS EOM last week urged authorities to expedite the tallying process with full traceability so the results can provide a certainty. The EU's EOM parliamentary statement likewise recognized a well-organized and peaceful election day, while flagging institutional tensions, points that underscore why the process must be completed transparently. President Castro's call, on the other hand, to annul the election is lacking in any merit and threatens to silence the voices of 3.4 million voters who cast their ballots on November 30. It's notable that the only delegation here that seems to find the election problematical is that of the country that had the election. The OAS, EU, United States, and national election observers witnessed no credible evidence supporting a call for annulment. Instead, they have urged completion of the count with total transparency and calm. As the CNA explained, a portion of the tally sheets, about 15%, is undergoing special scrutiny in accordance with Honduran law, and the Council has a legal window through December 30 to finalize the results. These steps should proceed without intimidation or violence to ensure the outcome reflects the votes of the Honduran people. A social media post by our president expressing his preference is not electoral interference. The fact is that the people of Honduras freely cast their ballots for their preferred candidates. We reject unfounded allegations of external manipulation and reiterate our call for all actors to respect the CNE's work and its legal timelines in place. The Libre Party is attempting to do exactly what we warned on November 25th, to create a pretext to annul or steal a democratic election and refuse to acknowledge the will of the Honduran people. We do not want to see another Venezuela. We will not accept a blatant disregard of the principles of democracy set forth in the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We will continue to support the institutions and observers working to safeguard the process until the last vote is lawfully accounted for. We commend the Honduran people who showed up on November 30 and patiently waited to cast their ballots and continue to wait patiently while each of their votes are counted. We commend those in leadership in Honduras who've called for peace and patience during this process. We also recognize the nonpartisan role of the armed forces of Honduras in safeguarding electoral materials and the diligence of CNE officials as they review the actas in line with observer recommendations to ensure traceability and certainty. Let me be very clear. The United States supports the integrity of the democratic process in Honduras. The Honduran people must not be robbed of their choice for the next president. We will respond swiftly and decisively to those who wish to defy the will of the Honduran people. We condemn those who are calling for violence in the strongest possible terms. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. To the United States. Canada, please. Thank you, Chair. Canada salutes holding this special session, which is so important for member states of the OAS. It allows us to be updated on the electoral situation in Honduras. We are also very grateful for the participation from the Honduran minister with us today. Thank you to the chief of the EOM from the OAS, Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, for his presentation, which shed so much light on the recent elections in Honduras. We hope to take this opportunity to underscore the excellent work carried out by the EOM from the OAS on the ground as part of these efforts focusing on strengthening democracy throughout the Americas.
Canada continues to closely follow the situation in Honduras. Canada echoes the concerns raised by the OAS electoral mission, which has called for patience while results are tabulated, and which notably rejected any call to disrupt public order. The people of Honduras have the right to freely choose their leaders through a transparent and credible process. Canada was proud to participate in international election observation efforts. Canada will continue to follow the situation closely and supports efforts that uphold a free, fair, and transparent electoral process, one that fully respects the democratic will of the Honduran people. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Gracias, Canadá.
Thank you, Canada. Colombia is recognized. Thank you, Chair. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much to Foreign Minister Eladio Loizaga, the Chief of the OAS EOM, for presenting this report, and also thank you very much to Ambassador Gerardo Torres for being with us today as part of the Office for International Cooperation and International Relations of the Republic of Honduras. And he highlighted the omissions in the report, and we've taken due note. First of all, I'd like to reiterate our support, our respectful support for the people and government of Honduras throughout this election. We celebrate that the elections held on November 30th took place in a mostly peaceful, participative environment, which is a reflection of the citizens' determination to determine their own future through official channels. And we reiterate our full respect for the sovereignty of Honduras, which is an essential principle of the OAS Charter and the Inter-American Democratic Charter. We are highly aware of the fact that it is exclusively the responsibility of the Honduran authorities to run and conclude the election pursuant to their own legal framework. This sovereignty is sustained in institutional legitimacy and is a pillar of confidence between states of the region. Against that backdrop, we greatly value the efforts of competent institutions to continue their work in independence and in line with the letter of the law, and the count phase of the election requires great rigor in ensuring credibility as well as non-interference. It is necessary to say what Bolivia already stated, but it is indispensable that we conclude in this manner. We also support and recognize the technical support provided by the EOM, particularly from the OAS, which contributes to a clear result in promoting transparency in the process, and we underscore the analysis carried out as far as the importance of political authorities and the government waiting for the results with responsible vigilance as we complete the count in line with the law and to faithfully reflect the will of the Honduran people. We respectfully call on all political stakeholders and social stakeholders as well to act with care and channel any differences through available institutions and preserving a climate of calm in order to conclude the process in orderly fashion. We also believe it is essential to protect the elections and their processes from any technological intervention. Therefore, digital integrity is sine qua non in order to ensuring that the citizens' will is expressed freely and transparently without any risks that may impact public trust or the democratic legitimacy. Finally, we reiterate our willingness from Colombia to continuing to cooperate with Honduras as they strengthen the electoral integrity and institutional operations, as well as building democratic confidence, always under the principle of non-interference, as noted already by Belize, and with full respect for the sovereign decisions made by the people of Honduras. I believe that we must really insist on respect for the principle of self-determination of the peoples, without which we cannot speak of any democracy. Thank you very much, Chair.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ambassador, for your words. Ecuador. Ladies and gentlemen, there are many different types of interference and meddling, and also many forms of silence. And sometimes we have silence in which we don't say anything, but there are also silences in which we do not debate, and there are silences in which we do not hear. There are types of interference which also stem from the authorities themselves in a specific space, in which sometimes we leave behind, they go outside the scope of their duties. And that is why I love the poem that says, sometimes the interference steps in barefoot. And that's why we need to be very careful as we address this topic in our Americas. We need to understand that the numbers know no nationality, and the OAS has a very strong responsibility on its shoulders, and the numbers reflect realities, and that is the democratic system that provides us with the necessary context in order to ensure certainty in any popular pronouncements. We all are aware of what the numbers say in Honduras. The Republic of Ecuador abstains from any judgment on the vote and its count. We are grateful above all, and we greatly value as well and support the work of the Electoral Observation Mission from the OAS, and we hear, debate, and address any reports made by that EOM. We will be responsible for the call that we urgently need these results. Thanks to the Electoral Observation Mission from the OAS, its Representative Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, who has spoken today before this Permanent Council, acting in line with the Democratic Charter's Articles 23, which provides us support, and 24, in which it is very clear that that mission has to do what it does, which is supporting a state that requested its presence. A state, I said a state, not a government. Civil society in Honduras needs that transparently, and it needs so urgently. We support their decision. The Inter-American Democratic Charter calls on all of us to recognize the unbreakable commitment to democratic defense and all institutionality from the OAS, and requesting that it be done through the regular and established channels. The National Electoral Council in Honduras has publicly informed us on concrete advancements, and that is why we have stated that this must be done swiftly. The results should be shared with celerity, and that way we will be able to ensure democracy in Honduras. We call on everyone to respect constitutional order, spaces of competence in a climate of peace with a clear focus. The established timeframes by the law, as well as the independence of electoral authorities, avoiding any statements or actions which may lead to uncertainty, impact institutional stability, or even question the legality of the election, and finally also alter the integration and essential mission of the OAS. We support the EOM of the OAS continuing to support this process in Honduras, as its technical support, impartiality, and professionalism today are more than ever necessary. Finally, Ecuador reiterates its unbreakable commitment to the democratic tranquility of our region. With this culture of integration, that demands that we act, that not be confused with interference. We must preserve democracy in the region, and with respect for the Inter-American Democratic Charter and each and every one of the spaces that we have built and we will continue to build, sometimes with a lot of roadblocks, in order to ensure that we are able to preserve the sovereign will of the peoples and find better times. There are times of change and democratic attitudes in the region which fortunately speak of hope. Yesterday, Chile was an excellent example of that. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. Argentina. Chair, I would like to begin by expressing my gratitude for the excellent work carried out by the OAS in Honduras under the leadership of Ambassador Eladio Loizaga and his entire team. We salute the Foreign Minister of the Dominican Republic and the Under Minister of Foreign Affairs of Honduras. The results were categorical. The elections in Honduras were legitimate. There was no fraud. This is a clear message. It is a resounding message. The brave people of Honduras turned out in large numbers to the polls and they reiterated popular will. Chair. Before, during, and following the elections, we heard a lot of different things, and please allow me to refer to just a few. It was reiterated that the special session of the OAS was a political judgment, external intervention, and attempting to promote a particular candidate. And yet the Inter-American Democratic Charter, which all of our states have signed, establishes how we should interpret this principle of non-interference with threats to elections and its transparency, activating mechanisms of the OAS in order to dissuade those who want to express their popular will. It was also stated that the special counsel was no longer useful because we, in fact, showed that there was no fraud. But it's worth asking ourselves, what would have happened if the EU, the OAS, and other international bodies would have not watched those elections? This narrative goes against the truth. And what we do know is that independent electoral observation was a guarantee of legitimacy and transparency during the elections. Chair, non-interference or political interference special councils in November and today are opportunities for the Honduran government to clarify its position, as it has already done, and to be part of a constructive political dialogue that goes beyond our differences and ensuring that we do not use state apparatuses in order to claim fraud, which only fritters away at institutionality and has an impact on any democratic transition. In my intervention at this special council held previously, I noted that we need to understand this convention as an exercise of preventive diplomacy, a recognition of a recognized Honduran human rights expert and jurist stated recently that elections held on November 30th in Honduras showed us that something that needs to be underscored. When preventive diplomacy works, the people are able to exercise their sovereignty without fear, violence, or undue interference. The collective examination of that election became one of the most clear and effective channels of preventive diplomacy in the hemisphere. Without the painful experiences of Nicaragua and Venezuela, some of us might be talking about conspiracy. However, those authoritarian regimes are a reality, and the inter-American system did not act in time to prevent them in those cases, and that is a painful lesson that we must all bear with us today. Chair, the statements from high-level Honduran authorities force us all to watch closely with concern. With just a minimum percentage of votes counted, they claimed that the incumbent party had won. With 50% counted, it was very clear that the incumbent was not going to win, and then they claimed there was fraud. Then, in order to pressure the others, they turned to the electoral authorities to move against the National Electoral Council. Then, with over 90% counted, they proclaimed that one of the opposition candidates had won before they'd concluded the process. And finally, on Saturday night, they turned to a government representative in the council, the Electoral Council, and pressured him to not sign the official final results, and claimed that to do so would be violations of his public duties. Chair, someone is calling for an institutional coup in Honduras, and that's the question we need to ask ourselves seriously. We hope not. I believe that today everyone around the world is focusing on the National Electoral Council, and it is the only appropriate body to declare the result of the election, no matter who has won. There is no margin to thumb our nose at popular will. Honduras is part of our democratic community, and we want them to continue being part of it. Chair, I would like to conclude as I started. Electoral observations are independent, and they have stated that there was no fraud in Honduras. And if there was no fraud, then the elections were legitimate. That verdict needs to resonate in Honduras and throughout the international community. And please allow me to express just in passing that there is no reason to kill the messenger. Please allow me to conclude quoting a Hispanic American poet. The truth is never sad. It always has a remedy. We support the EOM, and we trust that rationality will prevail and express the popular will of the people of Honduras, and that it will be respected. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. Now we give the floor to the Observer Mission of Spain. Thank you, Chair. Good morning. We have closely listened to the report from the chief of the OAS EOM in Honduras, former Foreign Minister Eladio Loizaga, as well as the Deputy Foreign Minister from Honduras. Thank you for convening this special meeting of the Permanent Council, given the concerning situation in the post-electoral situation in Honduras. And we recognize the work of the Secretariat for Democratic Strengthening and the OAS in general. The people of Honduras have shown their democratic vocation with their widespread participation in the recent elections held on November 30th, where they absolutely peacefully spoke their will throughout the entire day, and that citizens' will needs to be respected at all times. Therefore, just as was confirmed by the entities responsible for international supervision of this process, such as UNPD, the European Union, and the OAS itself through its electoral observation mission, given the recent events and statements from various political stakeholders, we need to guarantee respect for the operations of electoral authorities as well as the legally established counting system. We will continue to closely monitor the evolution of the situation. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador, for your intervention. Italy is recognized. Thank you very much, Chair, Secretary General, distinguished colleagues, Chief of the OAS EOM. Italy greatly values the work of the OAS in Honduras, and in particular the work of its electoral observation mission under the leadership of the Foreign Minister of Paraguay, Loizaga, and we've had the opportunity to hear his report today. We would like to express our satisfaction with the fact that Election Day on November 30th in Honduras generally took place in an environment of peace without any violence, and as noted by the EOM themselves, I'd like to underscore democratic participation and very civilian behavior by the people of Honduras. And the EOM arrived just a few days after Election Day, and we heard about an election of democracy for the world. However, we are aware that the post-electoral process and the delays in the tally count have led to serious concerns, which may undermine trust in the results. In particular, the significant delays in the transmission and vote count have led to uncertainty and may even be weaponized in order to delegitimize the results. Against this backdrop, the OAS and the European Union have called for ensuring that the electoral authorities in Honduras are able to conduct their work with full autonomy and impartiality, without any outside pressure or type of weaponization, with the twofold aim of swiftly concluding the vote count and proclaiming the results of those presidential elections. At the same time, the electoral observation mission, which is still on the ground, as well as that of the EU, have underscored the importance of ensuring that all political stakeholders follow the example of their citizens and avoid any actions that may disturb that process. Italy is in line with this message, which goes along with a firm demand from the electoral authorities to implement any recommendations from the OAS and its EOM, as well as acting with maximum transparency and celerity in order to include the tally count avoiding any doubt as to the legitimacy of the results. And to all political parties, we recommend that once the count has been finalized and any questions have been resolved within existing legal frameworks, that they recognized unconditionally the will of the people of Honduras, and which will have been then certified by the appropriate authorities. Indeed, we believe that rejecting any results from the elections without any evidence will undermine institutions. And again, we call on the authorities to consider any weaponization of legal entities would undermine the entire democratic process in Honduras. Chair. Italy reiterates its commitment to democracy and regional stability. Thus, it is vital that the OAS and the international community continue to support Honduras during this decisive phase in order to ensure clear and peaceful conclusions of any period of tension and uncertainty, in order to ensure stable institutions and stability in general, guaranteeing the rule of law as well as the democratic fabric of that country. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Ambassador. France is recognized. Thank you, Chair, Secretary General, ASG, Ambassador Eladio Loizaga, Chief of the OAS-EOM, ladies and gentlemen, ambassadors, dear colleagues. France is closely monitoring the latest developments from the general election in Honduras. We salute the statement from the OAS-EOM from December 10th, calling for respect and the prerogatives of the National Electoral Council, and the calling for restraint from candidates and political parties. We express our solidarity with the communique from the spokespersons of the EU Foreign Service, and that statement reiterated our support for the election, notably the Electoral Council, which must carry its work out without any intimidation or pressure. As we've stated during the Permanent Council special session held last, we are committed to monitoring transparent, free elections to guarantee respect for democracy and the stability of institutions. The EOM from the EU and the OAS sent to Honduras on November 30th have concluded their work, and we salute the Honduran people. Honduran attachment to democracy must be supported and respected. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ambassador. The EU is recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Following a request from the Honduran authorities and the National Electoral Council, the EU deployed an electoral observation mission, or EOM, for the general elections. The EOM has been present in Honduras since the 11th of October, deploying 138 observers for Election Day. We note that many stakeholders have praised the essential role that international observers, in particular the EU and the OAS, play in this context. And we highlight the good exchange of information between OAS and EU and thank the OAS for that. We exchange information on a regular basis. In the run-up to the elections, the EU issued a statement on the 18th of November expressing its concern about developments affecting the institutional framework and preparations for the elections, and calling on the Honduran authorities and on all political parties and actors to ensure that electoral institutions are able to operate independently and effectively in line with the Constitution. Regarding Elections Day, on 2 December, the EOM Chief Observer, member of the European Parliament, Francisco Assis, held a press conference in Tegucigalpa and issued a preliminary statement, followed by a press release in which he praised the high voter turnout and noted that elections were well organized and took place in a peaceful way and without major incident. At the same time, he also noted that the EOM observed significant challenges that needed to be addressed to improve future electoral processes. These would make the object of recommendations in the final report of the Election Observation Mission, which is due in early 2026. Since Election Day, EU observers have been present during the counting, tabulation, and verification of election results forms being carried out. We are aware that with more than 2 weeks after the election day, with counting delays and technical setbacks, the post-electoral context remains very uncertain. We also take note of challenges made by different candidates or parties to the electoral process. So far, the EOM has not observed any serious irregularities that could affect the current preliminary results. Our observers are still present and continuing to observe the tabulation and verification process. On the 10th of December, and in light of developments surrounding the counting process, the EOM issued a statement calling on all political actors to uphold the integrity of the ongoing process and to raise any concerns they might have using traceability mechanisms made available to them by the Electoral Council and other legal mechanisms. The statement also exhorted members of the CNE and Electoral Justice Tribunal to carry out their duties impartially and avoid politically motivated obstructions or delays. Furthermore, last Friday, the External Action Service issued a public statement reiterating our support to the current electoral process and the work of the National Electoral Council and calling on all candidates to wait and respect the counting process. We also called on all parties to respect the will of the Honduran people and calling them to refrain from actions that hinder the work of electoral institutions and to the respect of the rule of law. We remain present and vigilant, and we will keep monitoring the situation, our delegation, as well as our EU member states' embassies together very closely, and we stand ready to make further statements if and when the need may arise. Finally, the Electoral Observation Mission itself will continue to closely monitor the situation remotely and in close coordination with national observation organizations. As already mentioned, the EOM will present a final public final report containing the recommendations on possible reforms for the future electoral processes in 2026. Thank you.
I thank the representative of the EU. There have been 21 interventions, and I'd like to give the floor now to the representative of the government of Honduras, the delegation of Honduras, for some final remarks, and then the Secretary General for final remarks. The Vice Chancellor has the floor. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had two comments I'd like to make. Ambassadors, ladies and gentlemen, as I said already, 15 days have transpired since the elections concluded in Honduras, and there still is no result that has been submitted to the people of Honduras, and for one simple reason. In the ballots that we filled out when we voted, it says one thing, and the system says something entirely different. On the ballot, it says that I have 100 votes, and the system says that there are 20 votes there. And the candidate, which coincidentally supports, is supported by the President of the U.S., on the ballot says 50, but in the system it says it's 700. So how is that not going to instill distrust in this technical problem that is simply being presented as a lack of expertise? So we have a system which the political parties, well, we have proof here, but the system says something very different from that evidence that we have in hand. Now, the ruling party candidate never said that she was that had won the process. We all have this, the political parties all have this paper, the evidence of what happened, and then it's not what's said on the paper is not being upheld or honored, given the technical glitch that's being alleged, alleging again that the election was flawed. So in 2017, the OAS, after an electoral fraud in Honduras, called upon Honduras to repeat the elections, to hold them anew. And now, well, then the state of Honduras didn't do that, now represented by the party that now is presenting itself as the champion of democracy. Now, at that time, the OAS has said that there was fraud, and the EU did not say there was fraud. But to conclude, in 2019, the coup d'etat in Honduras kicked off a destabilization process throughout the region. Let's not let that bad precedent of direct intervention, even though the Honorable Ambassador of the United States does not see it as such, as the opposition of my country quotes me, I'm going to quote you. The senator and the congressman of the United States have spoken of an intervention and a serious error for having pardoned Hernando Hernandez, given that which is presented through the Permanent Council. If necessary, there should be a meeting of ministers to speak about what the state of Honduras sees as direct intervention of the President of the United States in our election process. Because if the United States says to Hondurans that it's going to not allow for remittances to be sent, that can lead to an incident that can be used as a means of manipulating the results in our country.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Vice Minister. The Secretary General has the floor.
Permanent representatives. First of all, I would like to appreciate our thanks to Foreign Minister Roberto Alvarez for taking part in this discussion, and also to the Vice Minister of Honduras, as well as to the 21 member states who have provided their views, and I thank you all very much. It coincides with many of the observations made by the Election Observation Mission, and it coincides with the political reporting which we received from our National Office of Ambassador Krajewicz and others. So I have little to add than just to say the following. First of all, I think this moment where we have spoken in a very short time twice in a special session about developments, political developments, electoral developments in a member state shows the value of multilateralism and the value of this organization as such. I wanted to make that statement because often we question ourselves, but I think it's important to have this opportunity and to listen to the member states and try to assist the member state, in this case Honduras, with the process they're going through. And of course, elections should be principally a domestic affair. That means that every eligible citizen of a country has and should have the right to cast their ballot, free of intervention, domestic or otherwise. I think we should keep in mind the spirit and the provisions in the Charter of the OAS, which is very clear on this. I think this is not specifically the issue which we are here for. We need to continue. This is what I take away from this discussion as well. We need to take away that it is important that the OAS, Secretariat for Democracy and especially DECO, continues providing assistance, technical assistance to member states to improve, reform, strengthen the electoral processes. What we have right now is a composition of electoral authorities which opens the door for politicization, and that doesn't help in the process. So we need to really see how we can strengthen the electoral framework in countries so that elections can take place without the issues which we are discussing here today. And I mention that simply because we have had other elections in the recent past in OAS member states, which went well because they are well organized, they are well structured. Bolivia had good elections. We had elections in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We had elections in St. Lucia. And yesterday we had the second round of elections in Chile. If you look at those elections, then we should be proud of the fact that democracy and electoral processes are lived accordingly with international standards, because all these elections went smoothly with recognition in a very high degree of maturity, and we should not forget that we have that as well. But there are some cases, in this case in Honduras. So from our perspective, the report of Ambassador Loizaga, whom we thank for his commitment, not only in the case of Honduras, but many other election observations which he has led, Secretary Krajewicz and Gerardo Icaza and the team of observers who are doing a great job. Of course, there is a technical process, and a technical exercise to be performed by the EOM, there is also a political process, which in both cases we are monitoring very closely. And from all what we have heard, and also from the report, the preliminary report of Ambassador Loizaga, is that we have a very complex electoral process, but also a complex political process on our hand. And I think it's important, as the process has not finished, finalized as yet, to await that outcome and to let the national process continue. I know that in the follow-up, if everything does not go as we would want to, it can become even more complex. But we will see when we enter that moment. It is important now to keep monitoring closely, and that is what the OAS mission is doing 24 hours a day, and they remain on the ground. It's important to keep monitoring the electoral process, but also the political developments. And in terms of the political developments, I think I would repeat the call made by all of you, in my view, is that political leaders, and especially the presidential candidates, have an important role to play in this phase of the process to demonstrate responsibility and contribute to order and peace in Honduras. The last thing we want is instability, going towards an election outcome, and then with that also a transition process which should go smoothly. My last point has to do with the role of the members of the electoral authorities. As I said, given the fact that they represent the different political parties, it is important for them at this stage really to demonstrate impartiality and to try to do what is expected from them based on the electoral law of Honduras in a way that it doesn't create more challenges. Regretfully, up to today, we see statements made by members of the CNE which are not helpful in the process. And that is something which should not be happening to the benefit of democracy, to the benefit of elections, free and fair, independent, and to the benefit of the people of Honduras. I believe it's important that we all keep supporting the people of Honduras, but also appealing to all involved politically and electorally to do what is expected from them, and that is to maintain peace and order in Honduras. And I can tell you that Ambassador Loizaga and a team will continue be present during this whole process. I believe he will be traveling this Wednesday to Honduras again. So we keep a close eye on how developments go, and I look forward to a normalization of the situation in such a way that we can move forward with an outcome accepted by all. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Secretary General. There not being any further requests for the floor, we have concluded today's order of business of this special session, and all of the interventions and the comments made will be duly reflected in the minutes of this meeting. I am appreciative of the information that was shared with us by the chief of the mission of the EOM in Honduras, Ambassador Eladio Loizaga. Thank you for being here at this special session of the Permanent Council. We appreciate the commitment by member states to democracy in Honduras. Reiterate that the Permanent Council will closely watch the final results of the November 30th election, and we call upon all of the stakeholders, electoral authorities, to stick to the democratic order in their country and the Constitution. I thank all of the delegations for your participation in this climate of respectful dialogue. Session adjourned. Thank you.